Contemporary Topics 1, Second Edition, by Helen Solorzano and Laurie Frazier. Copyright 2002 Longman Publishing Group, a Pearson Education Company. All rights reserved. The use of this audio program for the purpose of copying, transforming, or adapting in any manner, in whole or in part, is strictly prohibited without prior consent of Pearson Education. Unit 1, Happiness. Page 4, Vocabulary Preview. Part C. Listen to each sentence and repeat it. Try to pronounce the bold-faced word correctly. 1.
He wants to achieve a lot this year. Achieve.
2.
They assume I play basketball. Assume.
3.
He has a good attitude about school. Attitude.
4.
Think about all the factors before you decide. Factors.
5.
I'll improve if I play every day. Improve.
6.
He's optimistic about the future. Optimistic.
7.
Children's personalities form at a young age. Personalities.
8.
I have a positive feeling about it. Positive.
9.
She has a close relationship with her sister. Relationship.
10.
I'm satisfied with my life. Satisfied.
Page 6. Listening for main ideas. A. Close your book. Listen to the lecture and take notes.
Hi, good morning. Did you hear about the lottery winner last night? The man won, what, $2 million?
No, 3.
$3 million? $3 million. That's a lot of money, isn't it? Do you think that $3 million would make you happy? I'm asking you this because when you ask people what they need to be happy, many people will answer more money. We assume that money will make us happier, but is this true? Will winning the lottery help you achieve happiness? Today we're going to look at the idea of happiness, at the psychology of happiness, what makes some people happier than others. We'll look at 3 personality factors that we find in happy people. To find out about these personality factors, psychologists talk to hundreds of people. Now, first, they asked the people how happy they felt. You know, from very happy to not happy at all. Then they asked some more questions. They wanted to find out about people's personalities, such as their attitudes about life and so on. They looked at the differences between happy people and unhappy people. They found 3 factors that are very important for achieving happiness. So, let's look at those factors now. The first personality factor is that happy people are satisfied with themselves. This means that they like themselves as they are, and they're happy with what they have. Happy people may not like everything about their lives. They may be a little bit overweight, or may not have the best job, or may not live in a big, fancy house, but they don't need to change those things to be happy. They think more about the things they are satisfied with, not the changes they want to make. This feeling of happiness comes from the inside, not from something outside. So, happy people feel satisfied with themselves. On the other hand, unhappy people are often dissatisfied with themselves. They feel that something must change so they can be happy. They think if they lose some weight, or get a better job, or a nicer house, they will be happy. They are always looking for something outside themselves to make them happy. But the problem is, they never find it. No matter what they get, they're still dissatisfied and unhappy. The second personality factor is that happy people are optimistic. They look at the positive side of life, not the negative. Now, we all have problems, whether we're happy or not. But when happy people have problems, they assume that things will improve. They don't worry a lot and think about all the bad things that can happen. Instead, they have a positive attitude. However, unhappy people are the opposite. They are not optimistic and don't have a positive attitude. When they have a problem, they think about how bad everything is and assume that it'll get worse. So they make themselves even more unhappy when they think about all the bad things that might happen. Finally, the third personality factor is that happy people have good relationships with other people. They try to have close, loving relationships with friends and family. Studies show that close, loving relationships are one of the most important factors in achieving happiness. So happy people don't spend all their time building their careers or trying to make money. They also spend time building relationships with friends and family. Now, on the other hand, unhappy people don't have as many close relationships. They may have trouble making friends, or they may spend all their time working and then find that they're very lonely and unhappy. But for whatever reason, they don't have close relationships, and this makes them unhappy. So, what does this tell us? Well, if you want to be happier, don't assume that winning the lottery will help. There are other more important factors for achieving happiness. Now, let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll talk more about the factors that make a person happy.
Page 7. Listening for details. A. Close your book. Listen to the lecture again. Add details to your notes and correct any mistakes. Unit 1. Quiz. A. Listen to each question. Circle the letter of the correct answer. 1.
What did psychologists want to find out?
2.
How do happy people feel about their lives?
3.
Why are happy people optimistic?
4.
What factor is most important for happiness?
2. New kinds of food. Page 13. Vocabulary preview. Part C. Listen to each sentence. Circle the word you hear. 1.
I altered my plans.
2.
Weeds dominate my garden.
3.
Some chemicals are bad for the environment.
4.
I like to eat fresh fruit and vegetables.
5.
Exercise has many benefits.
6.
That farmer doesn't use pesticides.
7.
My strawberry plants don't look normal.
8.
We harvest corn in the late summer.
9. 9,
Genetically modified foods may have risks.
10,
Large animals consume a lot of food.
Page 15. Listening for main ideas. A. Close your book. Listen to the lecture and take notes.
Hi, everybody. How's it going?
Good.
Oh, yeah, okay, thanks.
Good. Has everyone turned in their homework? Alrighty, then, let's get started. If you remember, last week, we were discussing some research in the area of genetics. Today, I'd like to talk about something I'm sure you've all heard about, genetically modified, or GM, food. Genetically modified food is food, either a plant or animal, that has been altered in the laboratory by scientists. The scientists take something from one plant or animal and add it to a different plant or animal to make it grow in a different way. Today, we'll look at some of the benefits and the possible risks of genetically modified food. Let's start with a discussion of some of the benefits of GM food. Genetic scientists are really trying to make food plants that are better than normal plants. To make plants that are altered in ways that make the plant grow better or taste better or be healthier to eat than normal plants. One benefit is that genetically modified plants may need fewer pesticides than normal plants. For example, there is a type of corn that is bad for insects. When the insects eat the corn plant, they die. However, the corn doesn't hurt people. This type of corn is beneficial because farmers use fewer pesticides to grow the corn, and so there is less pollution in the environment. Also, the corn is less expensive because the farmers don't have to spend a lot of money on pesticides. So, by using fewer pesticides, the corn is cheaper and the environment is cleaner. Another benefit of genetically modified plants is that they may grow better than normal plants. One example is a type of genetically modified strawberry that can grow in cold weather. These are better than normal strawberries because farmers can plant the strawberries earlier in the spring and later in the fall, when normal strawberries usually die. So, as a result, farmers can grow many more strawberries than they used to. So that's another benefit, plants that grow better. Finally, a third benefit is that many genetically modified plants stay fresh longer after they are harvested. So, for example, there is a kind of tomato that stays fresh in the store for about 2 months instead of 1 or 2 weeks. This means that there is more time to get the food to the stores and that stores have more time to sell the food. Less food is thrown away and wasted. So it's a great benefit to have food that stays fresh longer, and we can consume more of the food we grow. Now that we've looked at some of the benefits of genetically modified plants, let's talk about the risks of growing this type of food. We don't really know what the harmful effects are, but there are several things that people are worried about. One risk is that the genetically modified plants may start to dominate the other wild plants in the environment. This is a problem with some types of tomatoes, for example. The new tomato plants are stronger than normal plants, and because they are stronger and grow faster than the wild plants, the genetically modified tomatoes may start to dominate the environment, causing the wild plants to die. So having one plant dominate all the other plants isn't good for the environment. Another risk is that genetically modified plants will hurt wild animals and insects in the environment. For example, the genetically modified corn I mentioned earlier has already caused this problem. Now, some butterflies that live near the corn are dying. Butterflies that are good insects and don't eat the corn. It's possible that corn is killing the butterflies somehow, but we're not sure. We just know that more butterflies are dying than normal. But clearly there's a risk that genetically modified foods can hurt animals and insects in the environment. But probably the most important risk is that genetically modified food may be harmful to the people who consume the food. The alterations in the plants may cause serious problems for people. We just don't know. Scientists are trying all kinds of new things, such as putting the genes from animals into a plant. For example, to make a fruit like strawberries stay fresh longer, scientists took a gene from a fish, a gene that helps the fish live in cold water, and put that into a strawberry. Will that strawberry be harmful to people? We don't know, but it may be. So it's clear that there are some important benefits to genetically modified food, but also some risks. Risks that a lot of people aren't willing to take. So let's stop here and discuss any questions you have at this point.
Page 15. Listening for details. A. Close your book. Listen to the lecture again. Add details to your notes and correct any mistakes. Unit 2. Quiz. A. Listen to each question. Circle the letter of the correct answer. 1.
What is genetically modified food?
2.
What genetically modified fruit did the speaker mention?
3.
What is a benefit of genetically modified food?
4.
What is a risk of genetically modified food?
'Unit 3. Public Art. Page 21. Vocabulary Preview. Part C. Listen to each sentence. Circle the word you hear. 1.
Teachers need a clear concept of their subjects.
2.
I have a stick painting of my mother.
3.
Her features look very real.
4.
She told me a story to illustrate her point.
5.
René Magritte made surrealistic art.
6.
The two countries' leaders tried to make peace.
7.
The Statue of Liberty is huge.
8.
Our city leaders promote the arts.
9.
I can't interpret this poem.
10.
To many Americans, the eagle symbolizes freedom.
Page 23. Listening for main ideas. A. Look at the pictures. Listen to the lecture and take notes.
Good morning, everybody. I hope you all enjoyed our trip to the Art Museum last week. Today we're going to talk more about modern art. We'll take a look at some examples of public art you can only find outdoors in public places. I'll explain the purpose of public art, and Then I'll describe some examples of public art that illustrate three common types of modern art: pop art, realism, and surrealism. But first, public art. These days, public art is becoming more and more popular. Many business and city leaders are putting up art in public places, in parks and gardens, near office buildings, and so on. Cities like to put art in public places for a couple of reasons. First of all, art helps to make our cities look more beautiful and interesting. Also, when art is outdoors, many people can look at it and enjoy it every day. They don't have to go to a museum. So, having art in public places lets more people enjoy art every day. Now, I'm going to move on to some examples of public art. Here's our first example: a silver spoon and a red cherry. This piece is huge. It's 29 feet wide and over 50 feet long. It's made of metal, steel and aluminum. It's painted silver and bright red to look like a spoon with a red cherry on it. The sculpture is a good example of pop art. Pop artists like to make art that shows popular things people see in their everyday lives. This artist likes to take common objects like food and make them into huge sculptures. So what do you think about it? Anyone?
I think it's great. It's really unusual. I like it because it's simple and easy to understand.
Yes, that's why many people like pop art. Any other opinions? Yes. Mark?
Well, I think it's okay, but I think art that is out in public should be something important, something that's very beautiful or that means something. It shouldn't just be some everyday thing, like a spoon.
Interesting point. So you can see that one problem with public art is that people interpret the purpose differently. They disagree about what it should look like or mean. And some people may like or understand a piece of art, while other people may not like it at all. As I already mentioned, one purpose of public art is to add beauty to public places where everyone can enjoy it. But another purpose of art is to illustrate ideas or concepts, to show some kind of meaning. Instead of using words, artists can send messages through their art to people who see it. Sometimes artists even use their art to promote their own beliefs. To give you some examples, here are sculptures that were made to promote the concept of peace. The first one is a large, about 16-foot-tall metal sculpture that shows a young woman on a horse. Notice how real and lifelike the features of the woman and the horse look. Because they are so realistic, we call this style of art realism. But the woman in this sculpture is actually a symbol for peace. So in this example, the art is realistic and symbolizes a concept, the concept of peace. Any questions so far? Okay then. Let's take a look at another sculpture that was made to promote the idea of peace. It's also made of metal and looks like a gun. It's a little smaller than the first example. It's about 6 feet wide and 13 feet long. Huge for a gun. It looks just like a gun until you notice that it is tied into a knot at the end. We all know that it is impossible to tie a gun into a knot, right? And so, because it's impossible, this sculpture is a great example of surrealism. Also, as you know, a gun itself doesn't symbolize peace. However, because the gun is tied into a knot and can't be fired, it illustrates the concept of peace. And so, in these three examples, we can see how public art can be used to make our cities more beautiful and interesting, and we can see how public art can communicate ideas or concepts to people. Let's take a break now, and when we come back, we'll look at some more examples of modern...
Page 24. Listening for details. A. Close your book. Listen to the lecture again. Add details to your notes and correct any mistakes. Unit 3. Quiz. A. Listen to each question. Circle the letter of the correct answer. 1,
What is public art?
2,
What sculpture is an example of realistic art?
3,
What concept do two of the sculptures in the lectures symbolize?
4,
What is the main purpose of public art?
4, Journey to Antarctica. Page 29. Vocabulary Preview. Part C. Listen to each sentence and repeat it. Try to pronounce the bold-faced word correctly. 1,
As we approached the city, I started to see lights from the buildings. Approached.
2,
There aren't any beaches in this area. Area.
3,
Despite the bad weather, we enjoyed our trip. Despite.
4,
My goal is to travel to Europe. Goal.
5,
I'm going to proceed with my plans. Proceed.
6,
My car got stuck in the mud. Stuck.
7,
The firefighter rescued the man from the fire. Rescued.
8,
We set up camp for the night. Camp.
9,
The boy watched his toy boat float on the lake. Float.
10,
We ran out of supplies on our camping trip. Supplies.
Page 31. Listening for main ideas. A, close your book. Listen to the lecture and take notes.
Good afternoon. Please take your seats. I have a lot to discuss today. Today, I'm going to talk about one of the greatest adventures of the 20th century, Ernest Shackleton's trip to Antarctica. Now, there are other explorers who have been to Antarctica, but Shackleton's trip is especially interesting because his goal was to be the first person to walk across the continent of Antarctica. Also, as you'll find out, this trip was also special because of the problems and difficulties that Shackleton and his crew endured along the way. In fact, and this is interesting, Shackleton made his trip to Antarctica on a ship called the Endurance. It's almost as if he somehow knew about the difficult events to come. Let's begin in England. The Endurance left London in 1914 with a crew of 29 men, 69 sled dogs, and a cat. After stopping in Argentina, the ship proceeded to South Georgia, an island about 800 miles from Antarctica. Then, on December 5th, 1914, the Endurance left South Georgia, and right away, the ship entered water that was filled with ice. However, despite the danger, Shackleton and his crew proceeded on their journey. Shackleton believed that they could reach the Antarctic continent despite the ice. He was wrong about this, however, and on January 18th, 1915, as the Endurance approached Antarctica, it became stuck in the ice. It couldn't go anywhere. The crew stayed on the ship, which floated along with the ice for more than 10 months. During that time, the crew lived on the ship, although they could go down on the ice and walk around if it was not too cold. On October 27th, 1915, Shackleton ordered the crew to leave the Endurance. They took food and other supplies, including 3 smaller boats, off the ship and set up camp on a large piece of floating ice. This turned out to be a good decision, because just a month later, they watched as their ship was crushed by the ice and sank under the water. So, is everyone with me so far? Any questions? Okay, then let's continue. For the next 6 months, the crew of the Endurance lived on the ice floating around the edge of Antarctica. They ate the food from the ship, but when that was gone, they hunted animals in the area and finally killed and ate their dogs. Finally, in April of 1916, the crew saw land. It was Elephant Island, which was about 100 miles away. They knew that the ice below was getting thinner and might break at any time, so they decided to proceed to the island. So, on April 9th, 1916, Shackleton and his crew got into the 3 small boats they rescued from the Endurance before it sank. They put all their supplies in the boats and began the journey to Elephant Island. It took them 7 days to get there. The journey was terrible, and they all almost died. So now the crew was on land, but there was no hope that they would be rescued from Elephant Island. It was too far away from anything. The nearest people were on South Georgia Island, over 800 miles away. Despite the danger, Shackleton decided to go to South Georgia. He knew it was their only hope for rescue. So, on April 24th, 1916, Shackleton and 5 men left in one of the small boats to try to get to South Georgia. 20 men stayed on Elephant Island. After 17 days in stormy seas, Shackleton and his men reached South Georgia. But they weren't finished yet. They had to walk for 36 hours to reach the whaling station. Finally, on May 20th, they reached the whalers. But remember, Shackleton still had to rescue his men on Elephant Island. This took more than 3 months. 3 ships tried to get to Elephant Island, but they couldn't get there because of all the ice. Finally, on August 30th, 1916, 22 months after they left on their journey, Shackleton rescued his men. Amazingly, everyone on the island was alive and they were all rescued. It's hard to believe, isn't it? So as you see, this is an important and interesting example of exploration from the last century. Now, let's take a look at some other famous explorers of the 20th.
Page 32. Listening for details. A. Close your book. Listen to the lecture again. Add details to your notes and correct any mistakes. Unit 4. Quiz. A. Listen to each question. Circle the letter of the correct answer. 1.
When did Shackleton and his crew make their journey?
Two.
Where did Shackleton and 5 men go for help?
Three.
What finally happened to Shackleton and his crew?
Four.
What finally happened to the Endurance?
Unit 5, Violence on Television, page 38. Vocabulary Preview, Part C. You will hear each word below in a sentence. Listen to the sentences. Write the number of the sentence that contains each word. 1,
Killing is a serious act of violence.
2,
Look at the long-term effects of your decisions.
3,
The average adult watches 3 to 4 hours of television a night.
4,
The discussion focused on how television affects children.
5,
Television commercials have a big impact.
6,
We estimate that children see about 30,000 commercials a year.
7,
Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck are cartoon characters.
8,
I got an immediate answer to my question.
9,
The quiz will assess your understanding of the lecture.
10,
There's a link between watching TV and bad health.
Page 39. Listening for main ideas. A. Close your book. Listen to the lecture and take notes.
Hello, everyone. Are you ready to get started? Okay. Today, I'd like to continue our discussion of violence in the media by focusing on television, on TV violence and its impact on children. First, I'll discuss how much violence is on TV, and then we'll talk about the impact of TV violence on children. There's a lot of debate about this issue today because children watch a lot of TV, right? TV has a huge impact on children. Kids today watch a lot of TV. In the U.S., almost all families have a TV, 98%. Many families have more than one TV. 52% of children have televisions in their bedrooms so they can watch TV whenever they want. And how much TV does the average child watch each day? Can anyone guess? 2 hours? Okay, that's one guess. Anyone else?
4?
Yes, it's about 3 to 4 hours of TV every day, or almost 1,500 hours a year. Now compare that to the amount of time that kids spend in school each year, about 900 hours, and you can see that TV must have a big impact. Now, many people feel that children's shows, such as cartoons, are much too violent. Some people even feel that the violence on television is teaching kids to be more violent. But is this true? Is there a link between the violence children see on TV and real violence? To answer this question, I want to focus on some of the research that has been done to assess the violence on television and how it affects children. To assess how much violence is on TV, research has focused on counting the number of acts of violence on TV in an average day. Now, this includes any act that could hurt or kill people in real life. Surprisingly, cartoons for children have the most violence, more than many shows for adults. Cartoons have an average of 32 violent acts per hour. So, 32 times every hour, one cartoon character hurts another character in some way. Well, you've seen this in cartoons, I'm sure. The characters hit each other on the head or shoot each other. many different violent acts. Other kids' shows have a lot of violence as well. For example, many kids' shows have characters that fight each other, hit and kick and punch each other, so those are very violent as well. So, by counting all these acts of violence, we can estimate that by the time a child is 12, he or she will have seen an average of about 100,000 acts of violence on television. That's about 30 violent acts per day. But does the violence really cause children to act more violently? Well, that leads us to our second question. How do we assess the impact of TV violence on children? First, we'll focus on some immediate effects of watching TV violence. What happens immediately after a child watches something violent on TV? In the first study we'll look at today, a group of children saw a TV show of a child hitting and kicking a doll. Then after they watched the video, each child was left alone in a room with the same type of doll. And guess what? All the children in this study, 100%, hit and kicked the doll, just like they saw on TV. So the link here between what kids see and what they do seems quite strong. Another way to assess the effects of TV violence on children is to focus on the long-term effects. What happens many years after a child watches violent TV? Now let's talk about the second study. In 1960, researchers studied 8-year-old children in a typical American city. They studied how much violent TV the children watched and whether the children acted violently at home or at school. Then, 10 years later, they studied the same children at age 18. The researchers found that children who watched a lot of violent TV at age 8 were more violent at age 18. Children who watched less violent TV were less violent at age 18. So this study suggests that there is a link between TV violence and real violence, that watching violent TV has long-term impact on these kids. So, do these studies prove that TV violence causes children to be violent? Even with the research, many people still disagree about that. So when we come back, we'll talk more about the impact of TV violence and the...
Page 40. Listening for details. A. Close your book. Listen to the lecture again. Add details to your notes and correct any mistakes. Unit 5. Quiz. A. Listen to each question. Circle the letter of the correct answer. 1.
How much TV does the average American child watch?
Two.
What TV shows have the most violent acts?
Three.
How many violent acts does the average child see on television by age 12?
Four.
What did the two studies show?
Unit 6. Too old to learn? Page 45. Vocabulary Preview. Part C. You will hear each word below in a sentence. Listen to the sentences. Write the number of the sentence that contains each word. 1.
Please remove your books from your desks.
2.
Adolescents experience many changes as they grow up.
3.
The ability to speak a second language is an important skill. There is evidence that children learn languages easily.
Five.
What did the scientists conclude?
Six.
We have a new theory about language learning.
Seven.
I'm going back to my native country.
8.
We studied Spanish for a short period of time.
9.
He has a strong American accent.
10.
Practice is critical for learning a new language.
Page 47. Listening for main ideas. A. Close your book. Listen to the lecture and take notes.
Okay, everybody, let's get started. Today we're going to talk about the critical period in language learning. But first, I'd like to ask you a question. How many of you have tried to learn a new language as a teenager or as an adult? Ah, I see, quite a few of you. Well then, I'm sure you agree that it's much more difficult to learn a new language when we're grown than it was to learn your first language as a child, right? But do you know why it's so much harder? No idea? Well, linguists believe it's because of the critical period of language development. The critical period is a theory that explains why it is easier for children to learn languages than for adults. That's what I'd like to discuss today. But first, I'd like to start by defining the critical period. And I'll give you some examples of a critical period in animals, in songbirds and cats. Then, I'll talk about evidence for a critical period for language learning in humans. So, what exactly is a critical period? The idea of a critical period comes from the study of animals. We say that there's a critical period, the only time when the animal can learn a new skill. Now, the critical period starts in the first weeks or months of an animal's life. During this time, its brain is ready to learn new things. However, when the animal gets older, the critical period ends. It cannot learn any more. So there are skills that must be learned when the animal is young. If not, they can't learn them as adults. Now, I'm going to move on to some examples. First, let's take songbirds. A songbird learns to sing the first few months after it's born by listening to its parents' song and repeating it. The bird can only learn to do this when it's a baby. An adult bird cannot learn to sing. So, if you remove the baby bird from its parents so that it doesn't hear the song, the bird just won't learn to sing when it's older. So, there is a perfect example of a critical period. Take another example. Cats. A kitten must learn to use its eyes in the first few weeks of its life. At first, the cat can't see very well, but over time, it begins to use its eyes. However, if you remove all the light in the room, so the cat grows up in the dark, it won't be able to use its eyes. When the cat is an adult, it won't be able to see well. So there is another critical period, when a cat must learn to see. Now, let's look at the critical period for learning languages in humans. As you've probably noticed, children learn new languages much more easily and quickly than adults. But we don't really know why. One theory is that there is a critical period for language learning. The theory is that people's brains change when they're adolescents, and that these changes make it more difficult for adults to learn a new language than for children. Of course, adults can learn. Many adults learn to speak a new language. They may not speak it perfectly, but they speak it very well. Well enough to use the new language for daily life. So we are not like adult songbirds who can't ever learn a new song. We can learn. That said, however, there is evidence for a critical period for learning to speak with a native accent. Somehow, children can hear the different sounds better, and their mouth muscles can make the new sounds. In many cases, a child will speak a new language with no foreign accent at all. But, generally, adults who learn a new language after adolescence speak with a foreign accent. They never learn to speak with a native accent, no matter how hard they try. It can be very frustrating. We may be able to hear the correct accent, but our mouths just can't pronounce the sounds correctly. Have you ever felt this way? So, unfortunately, this shows that there may be a critical period when humans must learn to speak with a native accent. So, we can conclude that there is a critical period when both animals and humans can learn certain things. For animals, like birds and cats, they must learn to do things when they are still very young. Humans, on the other hand, can still learn some new things as adults, like languages. But it's more difficult. Adult humans have a critical period for learning new accents. So, that's all for now. Let's get into our discussion groups. Does everyone have a copy of the handout?
Listening for details. Page 48. Listening for details. A. Close your book. Listen to the lecture again. Add details to your notes and correct any mistakes. Unit 6. Quiz. A. Listen to each question. Circle the letter of the correct answer. 1.
When do animals learn new skills?
2.
What must young kittens learn to do?
3.
What must young songbirds learn to do?
4.
What changes after the critical period in humans?